In the picturesque medieval village of Mazan in southern France, a crime so depraved that it defies comprehension came to light in late 2020. Dominique Pelicot, a 71-year-old retired real estate agent, was caught filming up women's skirts at a local supermarket. But this voyeuristic offense barely scratched the surface of his transgressions. When police searched his electronic devices, they uncovered a trove of photos and videos documenting the systematic drugging and rape of his wife of 50 years, Giselle Pelicot, along with evidence implicating scores of other men in her abuse. For nearly a decade, between 2011 and 2020, Dominique Pelicot had been secretly sedating his wife with powerful anti-anxiety medication, rendering her unconscious. In her vulnerable state, he would rape her himself and invite other men, strangers he met online, to do the same. The men came from all walks of life: soldiers, firefighters, prison guards, journalists, a municipal councillor. They ranged in age from 26 to 74. The abuse was meticulously catalogued, with over 20,000 photos and videos discovered in folders labeled with dates and names. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and the entire nation of France. Giselle Pelicot, unaware for years that she was being victimized, had suffered mysterious ailments: memory loss, hair loss, gynecological problems. She feared she had Alzheimer's or a brain tumor. The truth was far more sinister. When investigators confronted her with evidence of her husband's actions, her world shattered. Everything collapsed, she recalled. She filed for divorce and vowed to rebuild her life. As the extent of the depravity came to light, outrage swelled across France. Demonstrations erupted in support of Madame Pelicot and condemning the actions of her husband and his accomplices. The case sparked a national reckoning over sexual violence, consent, and the use of drugs to facilitate assault. Women's rights advocates hailed Giselle Pelicot's bravery in refusing anonymity and pushing for the trial to be public, to raise awareness of an often overlooked form of abuse. In September 2024, a trial unlike any other began in the city of Avignon. Dominique Pelicot and 50 other men faced charges of aggravated rape. The proceedings, expected to last through the end of the year, have riveted and repulsed the nation. They have illuminated the darkest impulses of human nature and laid bare the failures of French society to reckon with the pervasiveness of sexual violence. But they have also showcased the resilience of one remarkable woman, determined to reclaim her life and see justice served. This is the story of Giselle Pelicot, wife, mother, victim, survivor, and the men who callously abused her under the cover of unconsciousness for the better part of a decade. It is a tale of betrayal and bravery, of complicity and defiance. Above all, it is a powerful testament to one woman's refusal to be silenced or shamed by the crimes perpetrated against her. Hers is a voice that will echo long after the last gavel falls. About the perpetrators. Dominique Pelicot, the architect of his wife's decade of torment, cut a figure that belied his capacity for cruelty. A father of 3 and grandfather of 7, he had been married to Giselle for half a century. To outsiders, they appeared to be pillars of their community, a fairy tale romance for the ages. Even our friends said we were the ideal couple, Giselle recalled. But the facade of domestic bliss masked a more turbulent reality. Born in 1953 in central France, Dominique's upbringing was marred by dysfunction and abuse. His father, an alcoholic, was physically violent with his mother. Worse still, he sexually abused a young girl the family had taken in, allowing other men to do the same. These early experiences of trauma and betrayal left an indelible mark on Dominique's psyche. As a teenager, Dominique suffered his own sexual abuse. At age 14, while working as an apprentice electrician on a construction site, he was forced to witness and participate in a gang rape. It was too heavy to bear, he would later tell a courtroom. Still more devastating was the molestation he endured at age 9, at the hands of a male nurse during a hospital stay for a head injury. Despite these horrific experiences, Pelicot managed to build a seemingly normal life. He abandoned his electrical studies to work in the nuclear industry, then pivoted to real estate. He and Giselle, who met as teenagers, married in 1973 and started a family. But behind closed doors, Dominique's demons festered. Financial struggles put a strain on the marriage, as did Dominique's infidelities. In 2001, the couple divorced due to money troubles, only to remarry 6 years later under a more favorable arrangement. All the while, Dominique projected an air of respectability, a doting husband and father. But there were cracks in the facade. In 2010, shortly after the family moved to Mazan for retirement, Dominique was arrested for filming up women's skirts in a supermarket parking lot. He pleaded guilty and paid a small fine, keeping the incident hidden from his wife. It was a harbinger of the depravity to come. Unbeknownst to Giselle, her husband's predilections were taking a darker turn. He began frequenting a now-defunct website called Coco, known as a hub for illicit activities. Dominique found his way to a chat room called, without her knowledge, where he assumed the monikers, pervert, and dominator. There, he laid the groundwork for his wife's abuse, soliciting men to drug and rape her as she slept. According to psychologists who evaluated him, Dominique's behavior stemmed from a toxic brew of childhood trauma, sexual deviance, and deep-seated manipulation. He has a paraphilic disorder, an expert testified, marked by a penchant for voyeurism and somnophilia, sexual arousal from unconscious or sleeping persons. The fact that his wife is inert increases his feeling of control, the expert said. Pelicot himself has acknowledged the roots of his depravity, telling the court, "You aren't born a pervert, you become one." He claims his wife's rejection of partner swapping fueled his desire to drug and share her with other men. Choking back tears, he spoke of an addiction that overtook him, a compulsion he could not control. Yet for all his professed remorse, Dominique Pelicot remained a master manipulator. He cannily curated his image, playing the part of doting husband and father while meticulously planning his wife's violation. Even as Giselle suffered unexplained ailments and blackouts, he feigned concern, accompanying her to doctor's appointments. His depravity extended beyond his wife. Police found nude photos of his daughter Caroline on his computer, though he denies taking them. He secretly filmed his daughters-in-law using the bathroom. No woman, it seemed, was safe from his predation. In court, Pelicot has vacillated between self-pity and self-aggrandizement. He casts himself as a victim, broken by the traumas of his youth. Yet he also revels in his power over the men he lured to assault his wife, bristling at any suggestion that he misled them about her consenting to the abuse. As the trial unfolds, a portrait emerges of a man warped by his demons, consumed by perversion and a pathological need for control. A man who shattered the most sacred of trusts in pursuit of his darkest compulsions. A man who now faces a reckoning for his crimes, and who has become a symbol of the insidious evil that can lurk behind the most ordinary of facades. Details of the crimes. The predations of Dominique Pelicot against his wife Giselle spanned nearly a decade, from July 2011 until his arrest in September 2020. But the fateful unraveling of his depraved scheme can be traced to a single day, August 29, 2020. On that sweltering Saturday morning, shoppers at a supermarket in Carpentras, a town near the Pelicots' home in Mazan, noticed a man behaving suspiciously. Dominique Pelicot, then 69 years old, was surreptitiously pointing his phone up the skirts of women as they browsed the aisles, capturing illicit videos. A security guard was alerted and confronted Pelicot, seizing his phone and detaining him until police arrived. It was not the first time Pelicot had been caught engaging in such behavior. A decade earlier, in 2010, he was arrested for using a camera hidden in a pen to film up women's skirts at a supermarket outside Paris. He paid a small fine and, crucially, kept the incident hidden from his wife Giselle. But this time, the consequences would be far more severe. As police searched Pelicot's confiscated devices, they stumbled upon a hornet's nest of evidence pointing to far more sinister crimes. In a folder labeled "Abuses," they found carefully catalogued photos and videos documenting the repeated rape of an unconscious woman, later identified as Giselle Pelicot. The earliest dated back to July 23, 2011. Giselle, police soon learned, had been an unwitting victim of her husband's depravity for the better part of a decade. Dominique had been secretly drugging her with massive doses of lorazepam, an anti-anxiety medication he hid in his hiking shoes in the garage. The pills, prescribed by Dominique's brother, a doctor, rendered Giselle comatose. In her vulnerable state, Dominique raped her himself and invited scores of men to do the same. The mechanics of the abuse were chillingly methodical. After drugging his wife, typically by slipping crushed pills into her food or drink, Dominique would arrange for men to come to the couple's home in Mazan. Most he had met online, in a now-defunct chat room called Without Her Knowledge. There, he solicited strangers to sexually assault his sleeping wife, detailing his plans with clinical precision. The men, for their part, followed a sordid script. They would arrive at the house and wait in the kitchen while Dominique checked to ensure Giselle was unconscious. They were given strict instructions. No smoking, no cologne, lest the smells rouse her. They were to remove their clothes before entering the bedroom. Then, as Dominique filmed, they took turns violating Giselle's motionless body. The abuses were astonishingly frequent. Dominique admitted to drugging and assaulting his wife 2 to 3 times a week, far more often than the footage police recovered suggested. More than 80 men in total were alleged to have taken part over the years. 50 now stand charged alongside Dominique. For Giselle, the revelation of her abuse was earth-shattering. For years, she had suffered mysterious ailments, memory loss, unexplained pain, gynecological issues. She'd lost hair and weight. Fearing dementia or a brain tumor, she'd consulted doctors and undergone tests, always with Dominique playing the part of concerned husband at her side. His acting was so convincing that when police initially told Giselle her husband was under arrest, she defended him as a great guy. That illusion was brutally shattered when investigators sat her down and revealed the photos and videos of her abuse. Everything collapsed, Giselle recalled of that moment. In some of the footage, she could hear herself snoring as men assaulted her. She recognized one of them, a man who had come to her house to discuss cycling with her husband, a man she'd exchanged pleasantries with at the local bakery, never imagining he had raped her. The fallout extended beyond Giselle. On Dominique's devices, police found nude photos of the couple's adult daughter Caroline, captured as she slept. "I realized right away I was drugged in that photo," Caroline, who now goes by a pseudonym, testified in court. Dominique also secretly filmed his daughters-in-law in the shower. As the investigation widened, the scope of Dominique's predation grew. 2 other women came forward to accuse him of sexual assault. In one case from 1991, he is alleged to have raped and murdered a 23-year-old woman in Paris. In another from 1999, his DNA was found at the scene of an attempted rape in Seine-et-Marne. Both women, like Giselle, were allegedly drugged. Both were real estate agents, a profession Dominique knew intimately. For the men implicated in Giselle's abuse, the revelations prompted a spectrum of responses. Some admitted their guilt and expressed remorse. Others insisted they had been misled by Dominique to believe Giselle was a willing participant in a libertine game, only pretending to be asleep. One man who came forward, but is not among the 50 being prosecuted, described feeling trapped by Dominique, fearing for his life as he realized Giselle was truly unconscious. Dominique, for his part, has admitted to the broad contours of the abuse while seeking to downplay his control over the other men. "I didn't force anyone, they came to look for me," he said in court. "I never handcuffed and dragged anyone." He claimed the assaults arose from an addiction born of his own childhood abuse, a perversion he could not resist. The effects on Giselle have been profound. Beyond the physical toll of the years of hidden abuse, she has faced the psychic trauma of having her reality upended, her trust shattered, her bodily autonomy violated in the most intimate of ways. She has contracted sexually transmitted infections, including from one man who was HIV positive. "I no longer have an identity," she told the court. "I don't know if I'll ever rebuild myself." Yet in the face of such unimaginable betrayal, Giselle has shown remarkable bravery. She left Dominique the day she learned the truth, packing 50 years of shared life into 2 suitcases. She pushed for the trial to be public, refusing the anonymity afforded to sexual assault victims. Her goal, she has said, is to tear away the stigma and shame that can shroud such cases, to encourage other women to come forward, to reclaim power over her own story. The trial, which began in September 2024, has forced Giselle to confront her abuse in excruciating detail. Videos of her assaults have been shown in court. She has listened to men claim they thought she was awake, that she agreed to the depravities inflicted upon her inert body. Through it all, she has remained composed, defiant, determined. "It is not for myself that I am testifying, but for all the women who suffer chemical submission," Giselle declared in court, her voice steady. In choosing to put her own face and name to the case, she has become a powerful symbol, a beacon for survivors of sexual violence. Investigation and trial. The unmasking of Dominique Pelicot's crimes against his wife Giselle set in motion a legal reckoning as complex and wrenching as the decade-long saga of abuse itself. From the moment police uncovered the trove of photos and videos documenting Giselle's drugging and rape, the wheels of justice began to grind, slowly and inexorably, toward an unprecedented trial. The initial police investigation was a mammoth undertaking. The videos and photos found on Dominique's devices spanned 9 years and implicated scores of men in the assaults on Giselle. Investigators painstakingly cataloged the evidence, using the footage to identify and track down the alleged perpetrators. The breakthrough came in Dominique's meticulous organization of his digital files. Each photo and video was time-stamped and labeled with a date and a name, a self-made roadmap of his depravity. Police used this to build a timeline of the abuse and to match faces to identities. As they delved deeper, the scale of the horror grew. More than 80 men were alleged to have taken part in the rapes, lured by Dominique through an online chat room with the chilling name, without her knowledge. There, he detailed his plans and solicited participants with brazen openness. Armed with this digital trail, investigators methodically tracked down the accused men. They came from all walks of life: a soldier, a journalist, a nurse, a prison guard, blue-collar workers and white-collar professionals. Many were fathers and husbands themselves. When confronted with evidence of their involvement, their reactions ranged from contrition to denial. Dominique himself was arrested and charged with a raft of offenses, including rape, complicity in rape, and administering harmful substances. He made a partial confession, admitting to drugging and abusing his wife and filming her rapes. But he insisted the other men were not misled, that they knew Giselle was unconscious. As the investigation widened, so too did the scope of Dominique's alleged crimes. 2 other women came forward to accuse him of sexual assault. In one chilling case from 1991, he was charged with the rape and murder of a young woman in Paris. In another from 1999, his DNA was found at the scene of an attempted rape. Both women were allegedly drugged, and both were real estate agents, an unsettling echo of Dominique's own professional background. The case against the other men was more complex. Of the more than 80 alleged participants, 50 were ultimately charged with rape or attempted rape. Some admitted their guilt, expressing remorse and claiming they were misled by Dominique to believe Giselle was a willing participant in a sexual game. Others maintained their innocence, insisting they thought she was merely pretending to be asleep. As the investigation ground on, Giselle Pelicot made a fateful decision. Offered the anonymity typically granted to sexual assault victims in France, she instead chose to make the proceedings public, to put her face and name to the case. It was a remarkably brave choice, one aimed at destigmatizing the often taboo subject of sexual violence. In September 2024, more than 2 years after Dominique's arrest, the trial began in the city of Avignon. It was a legal proceeding unlike any in French history, 50 defendants, all men, standing accused of raping a single woman as she lay unconscious, drugged by her own husband. The courthouse was transformed to accommodate the logistics of such a mass trial. A special secure unit was constructed to hold the defendants who remained in custody. A separate courtroom was set up to handle the overflow of attendees. The proceedings were projected onto screens around the building. For Giselle, the trial meant a brutal public reckoning with her most intimate trauma. In excruciating testimony, she recounted her ordeal: the mysterious ailments, the memory loss, the sense of betrayal upon learning the truth. She spoke with composure and conviction, her voice never wavering. "I am not a victim, I am a survivor," she declared. In her unflinching testimony, she embodied the power of speaking out, of reclaiming one's story. Her bravery in the face of unimaginable adversity made her a national hero, a beacon of resilience. But the trial also laid bare the depths of the depravity she endured. Videos of her abuse were played in court, images so disturbing that even hardened legal professionals blanched. Giselle herself was often absent during these showings, unable to bear reliving her trauma. Dominique, in his own testimony, cut a pathetic figure, alternately self-pitying and defiant. He admitted to the broad contours of the abuse, to the drugging and the rapes and the filming. But he bristled at any suggestion that the other men were unwitting participants, insisting they knew exactly what they were getting into. For his part, Dominique claimed his actions were born of an uncontrollable urge, an addiction, rooted in his own history of abuse. He recounted being sexually assaulted by a male nurse at age 9 and being forced to participate in a gang rape as a teenager, experiences, he said, perverted him. Yet he also possessed a chilling sang-froid as he recounted his depravities in Mazan. "I am a rapist," he told the court, as if that were an immutable fact, not a heinous choice. Throughout, he showed little empathy for his wife, even as he claimed to still love her. As the trial unfolded, the accused men took the stand one by one. Some wept, some raged, some sat in stony silence. A few dared to suggest Giselle was not truly unconscious, that her occasional movements during the assaults were evidence of her complicity. These claims were roundly rejected by the prosecution. In the end, after a wrenching months-long trial, the verdict was unequivocal. Dominique Pelicot was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison, the maximum allowable. The bulk of the 50 other defendants were also found guilty and given lengthy sentences. It was a resounding victory for Giselle, a long overdue measure of justice. But it was also a broader triumph for survivors of sexual violence, a powerful message that even the most seemingly unspeakable crimes would not go unpunished. In her final statement to the court, Giselle was unbowed. "I am not a victim," she repeated. "I am a fighter. And I will continue to fight, not just for myself, but for all the women who have suffered in silence, who have been told their trauma doesn't matter. It does. We matter." Impacts of the crimes. The trial of Dominique Pelicot and his 50 co-defendants was more than a legal proceeding. It was a watershed moment, a seismic reckoning with the pervasiveness of sexual violence and the failures of society to adequately address it. The case, with its lurid details and staggering scope, captivated and repulsed the nation in equal measure. For many, the most shocking aspect was the sheer number of men involved. That more than 80 men could be implicated in the repeated rape of a single woman, over the course of a decade, seemed to confirm the darkest fears about the ubiquity of misogyny and sexual predation. "This case is not about a few bad apples," said one women's rights advocate. "It's about a society that has allowed a culture of rape to flourish, that has valued the reputations and freedoms of men over the safety and dignity of women." Indeed, the trial laid bare the myriad ways in which sexual violence is enabled and excused. From the men who claimed they thought Giselle Pelicot was awake and willing, to the friends and neighbors who noticed nothing amiss in the Pelicot household over the years, to the lenient treatment of Dominique's prior voyeurism arrest, the case was a damning indictment of a system that too often looks the other way. For the tiny town of Mazan, the revelations were earth-shattering. Many residents struggled to reconcile the genial facade of Dominique Pelicot with the monstrous acts he perpetrated. Some lashed out at Giselle, blaming her for bringing shame upon the community. The mayor himself caused outrage by suggesting she was better off not remembering her abuse. But for every backward step, there were signs of progress. The outpouring of support for Giselle, both in her hometown and across France, was immense. Thousands took to the streets to demand justice, to proclaim that the shame belongs solely to the perpetrators, not their victim. The trial also sparked a broader conversation about the use of drugs to facilitate sexual assault, a disturbingly common tactic that often goes undetected. Lawmakers began discussing ways to tighten regulations on prescription medications and to better educate the public about the risk of chemical submission. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the dialogue around sexual violence itself. Giselle Pelicot's courage in speaking out, in putting her face and her story into the public domain, emboldened countless others to come forward with their own experiences. Her refusal to be cowed, to be defined by her trauma, was a powerful example of resilience and reclamation. "She has shown survivors everywhere that they have nothing to be ashamed of," said one advocate. "That they can speak their truth, that they can demand justice, that they can heal and thrive on their own terms." In the end, the legacy of the Pelicot case will be one of both horror and hope. Horror at the depths of cruelty that can reside in seemingly ordinary men, at the insidious ways in which misogyny can manifest. But hope in the power of survivors to reshape the narrative, to transform their pain into purpose and activism. For Giselle Pelicot, the journey is far from over. The wounds inflicted upon her, physical and psychic, will take a lifetime to heal. But in her unflinching bravery, she has already triumphed. She has shown that the voice of a single survivor, raised in defiance, can echo across a nation. As France grapples with the aftermath of this unparalleled trial, as it reckons with the rot of rape culture that allowed such atrocities to flourish, it is Giselle's words that linger. I am not a victim. I am a survivor, and I will never be silent again. In this, she speaks for generations of women, past and present and future. Hers is a clarion call, a challenge to us all to confront the specter of sexual violence head-on, to dismantle the structures that enable it, to build a world where no one need suffer as she has. It is a promise and a prayer, a vision of a future forged in the fires of her indomitable will.